Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Chaf Aleph, second to the last page but one in Yevmot. We're learning for Fushlan Yosef Ben Chaim Michal and Elazar Ben Reuma. Yesterday we got down about halfway down the page on daf Kuf Chaf Aleph. Tanya, what is the discussion? We're talking about the fact that the rabbis were very lenient when it comes to reporting the death of a man so that his wife could get remarried. And it was hard to get witnesses in those days. When they do give witnesses, we said if you're doing it based on testimony of witnesses or witness, you have to see the face, the entire face. Otherwise, there could be a mistaken identity, and you can't assume that he's dead even if he's injured, unless he's extremely injured, like for example, an animal is eating his heart or is eating up his lungs. Vital organs, then you know that the man is dead. Also, you can only report within 3 days, said the Mishnah, because within 3 days of death, because otherwise the body begins to decay, decompose, and looks differently than it was when he was alive. The Mishnah also said that if he drowns, if it's Mayim Sheish himself, like a lake or a pool of water where you could see all the perimeter, and he doesn't come up, then you know he's dead. However, if that was the Mishnah said according to Rav Yossi, Rav Meir said even Mayim Sheish himself, like a lake or a river or let's say a pond or a pool where you could see all the sides, even there we don't let his wife get remarried because we're afraid that maybe he got rescued somehow. But Rav Yossi says no, that's only in Mayim She'ein himself. Meaning, where do we say that his wife should not get married? Only water where you can't see the end. So it's possible that he swam away or the current took him away somewhere and he washed up ashore alive somewhere else where you can't see, beyond the horizon or beyond the bend in the river where you can't see it. Only there do we say that it's also. But if the man drowned in a pool and he didn't come up, the guy fell in the water or lake, you see all the banks and all the sides, and he doesn't come up after an hour, there's no way that he could be alive, and then you could report that his wife is dead, and that he's dead so that his wife can get remarried. Tanya Amar Rebbe, right smack in the middle of the page, right even where it says Gemara and Rashi. Tanya Amar Rebbe, Ma'aseh b'shnei b'nei was a story with two men, Machmar and two fishermen. Machmar b'yadin, they were casting nets in the Jordan River. One of them entered a fish pond on the banks of the shore of the river. The river was quite big at that point. There was a fish pond where fish get caught in there, and he entered into that pond. It was like a sort of a cave, and he went in there. The pond, Rashi says, that's partially above the regular water level, partially below, and a person could go in there and stick his head above. But he entered that cave, that fish pond. The shakachama, the sun set the lower piskel. He didn't know, he couldn't find his way out. It got dark and he got lost in there. It was a big fish pond and he couldn't find his way out. His friend waited for him. Enough time for him to be able to expire if he couldn't, if he was underwater. His friend assumed that he was underwater and he didn't come out. And he went and he told the family that the man died. He drowned. But the truth was that he hadn't drowned. He was in this fish pond with his head above the water, but he couldn't find his way out. It was dark. He couldn't find his way out. It was all like he couldn't find the door or the opening of the fish pond that would lead him back into the river or up the shore. So Lamacha, the next day, Zor Chachama, the sun came up. The man who was trapped in the fish pond, at first light, he was able to see his way out. He saw the opening. He came out. He came home. He found the great eulogy in his house, and the family was already sitting Shiva, and he came home. Great joy for them. Amar Rebbe, Kama Gedolim Derech Chachamim. They were probably fighting up Yerusha already. But anyway, he says, the Rebbe said, look how great are the words of the Chacham Sha'amru Mayim Sheish Lam Sof Ishtam Materis. If it's water that has an end, meaning you could see all the perimeter, then his wife, his mother get married because he obviously didn't come up. She'ein Lam Sof Ishto Asura. But if it has no end, his wife is usher. In this case, they couldn't see the end. The Gemara says, you get a fish pond even in a place, even in a great lake, where you could see the Mayim Sheish himself, and it has an end, but it could still be a fish pond that he could have been lost in. It says, it's not likely to have a fish pond like that in a pool or a lake in which you could see all the sides. It's not unlikely. It's more likely in a larger area. All right, so that was the point is that this was Mayim She'ein Lehem Sof, that didn't have an end, and therefore his wife should not have been allowed to remarry, or in this case, she didn't remarry. He came up the next day. She wasn't remarried yet, presumably, just that they were sitting Shiva, and he was still alive because he was able to get out. The rabbi said, if you can't see the ends of all the banks of the river or all the sides of the pool, then you have to assume maybe he's still alive and his wife is not allowed to remarry. However, if it's a pool that you could see, and even if he doesn't come out, obviously, if you find the body, you find the body. But if he doesn't come up out of there, you assume that he's dead. Amar Vashi, this is we say that water that has no end, unlimited water like the ocean, that has no end, his wife is also to get remarried. That's a normal person. If it's a rabbi low, then you can assume that he's dead. Why? If he would have gotten out of the river someplace else, out of the ocean, if he got onto dry land, people would have heard about it. Did you hear Rabbi Fishman was saved? Everybody would know about it. And since you didn't hear that, he must be dead. Gemara says, that's not the case. It doesn't make a difference if you're talking about a commoner. It doesn't mean if it's a rabbi. She should not get remarried if he drowned in let's call it the open seas. If he drowned in the open seas, he shouldn't get married because maybe he came up ashore. Even though he's a rabbi, maybe the word didn't reach you. However, notice he says over here, Di'evet, if she did get remarried based on that, we let her stay with her new husband. Even though we say that she shouldn't get remarried if he died in the open seas because maybe he washed ashore someplace, maybe he was okay. However, so we say she shouldn't get married, but if she got married, we don't kick her out of the marriage because the odds are that he is dead. Tanya, I was once on the ocean. I was on a boat. I saw a shipwreck. And I was very upset because I knew on that boat had a great Talmud Chacham, Shabbat Umar Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva was on that boat. I saw a shipwreck and I said, oh my gosh, Rabbi Kiva must have drowned. When I reached dry land, Rabbi Kiva himself came and he talked in Torah, deliberated in halachas in front of me. Amarti lo, Beni, I said to him, my son, Gamliel was the older one, Beni, mi alecha, who brought you out of the ocean? I saw your boat went down, your ship went down. Who got you out? Amalei, he told me, Daf shel Sfina is Amalei. One of the planks of the boat came to me, so to speak. I came across one of the planks of the boat that was presumed that was broken up, that was wrecked, and I held on to it. And every time a wave came to me, I lowered my head to let the wave go above me, and eventually I reached shore. Rasham come against you, people fight against you. Lower your head. In other words, don't say anything. Let it go. Russia comes against you. Lower your head. Let it go. Better to keep your mouth shut. What does it say that? More in Sanhedrin, I forget the Gemara, but it says that 100 evils will befall a person, but the better thing is just to keep your mouth shut and look the other way, right? It's better not to answer. So he said, if a Russia comes against you, lower your head and let it go. So here he says also, I lowered my head. The wave went against me. The wave was coming to drown me. I lowered my head and eventually I reached shore. Amarti ba'osa shor. At that time I said, coming down to the Chachamim. What did the Chachamim said? That if it's water that you could see the ends, then she can get remarried because he must be dead. Maim she'ein himself, like here in the open seas. Maim she'ein himself, she's not allowed to get remarried. And here it's case. I thought Rabbi Kiva was dead, that he had drowned. It turns out that he wasn't. Tanya Rabbi Kiva. Now Rabbi Kiva himself said, I guess he wasn't afraid to go on the boats, even though he had experienced a shipwreck, unless this took place before. So he says, once I was on a boat, I saw another boat that was foundering in the sea. It was at risk. It was shaking back and forth. Looked like it was going to go down. When I was upset about it, because I knew there was a Tam Chacham on that boat, it was a mayor, and I assumed that boat Also, the boat went down and Rav Meir was dead. When I reached that state of Kaputkia, it's a place in Asia, he came, Rav Meir himself came to Yashab, and he said, and also he was deliberating halacha before me. My son, who got you out of the water? I saw your ship was about to go down. Who got you out of the water? A wave threw me onto another wave, and that wave onto another, until it cast me ashore on the on dry land. Like surfing, yeah. He wasn't doing it intentionally though. Marty, also at that point I said, how great are the words of the rabbis, Shamru, that they said, Maim sheish lam sofish to again, water that you could see the end like a pool of water. His wife is mutter to get remarried if he went down there because he didn't come out. There's no other way out, no way for him to come out. You have to look at it practically. If he went down in a pool or in a lake, even though he didn't come out, because he didn't come out and you don't see the body, but there's no other way you would have seen him come out ashore because you saw all sides. Ma'im she'ema himself on the open seas, ishtu asura, like in this case. So both we see Rabbi Kiva tells a story with the mayor who survived the shipwreck, and Rabbi Leal told the story about Rabbi Kiva who survived the shipwreck, and you shouldn't assume that they're dead. Tana Rabbanan, Nafal Govarayas, let's say a man fell into a lion's den. Ain't made in love. You can't testify that he's dead because it's possible, right? It's possible that he survived. Maybe the lions weren't hungry. He stood aside. He didn't bother them. Let's say that he fell into a pit full of snakes and scorpions. You can rest assured that he's dead. He couldn't have survived. Rabbi Yibn he says, you can't testify that he's dead, even if he fell into a pit full of lions and scorpions. Why? Because we attribute that we apprehend that possibly Shema Chavru, maybe he's like a charmer who knows how to deal with the snakes, knows how to do something there with a stick or something or some charm, and he's able to keep them away. But Tanakama says no. Agavitsa masculate, because of the pressure that he fells on them when he fell into a pit full of scorpions and snakes, they would rise up against him, even if he had to charm him, but because there's no room there in a big lion's den, he could have stood on the side. But over here, because of the pressure that he fell on them, they're gonna kill him. So in a lion's den, you can't say that he's dead, but in a pit full of scorpions and snake, you can assume that he's dead. That was, of course, the nace with Yosef, right? It says there was no water, but there were snakes and scorpions, and still God saved him. So Yosef knew that he was destined for greatness and that God was going to be at his side, because that was a nace. Let's say he fell into a furnace, fire. Meaning love, you can testify that he's dead. There's no way that he could survive the fire. Let's say he fell into a large boiling kettle or a boiling urn, a gigantic urn full of wine or oil. Also be eaten love. You can also testify that he's dead. There's no way to survive that. He would have burned up. Mishum Ravacha said, no, it depends. Shall shemen be eaten love. If he fell into an oil tank, there was very hot, boiling hot, then you could testify that he's dead. Why? When he fell in and some of the oil splashed out onto the fire below, the oil adding onto the fire would have just increased the fire. So he's definitely dead. So but not for wine, right? Because when he fell into a pit full of boiling wine, when the wine splashed over onto the fire, it would have extinguished the fire. It's more like water. It would have extinguished the fire. So maybe the fire then would have abated and gotten cooled off, and he could have survived. Amulos, they said to Rav Acha, no. Sure, it extinguishes it a little bit, but then it increases it more. In other words, I guess the water element in the wine, part of it extinguishes the fire, but then afterwards it increases it more. So therefore, you could assume whether he fell into a pit of scorpions or he fell into a furnace or he fell into a big, large vat, a boiling vat of wine or oil, he's definitely dead. Amar Meir. So Rav Meir tells the story in the Mishnah. He said, Rav Meir said there is no difference whether he fell into a Maim She'esh himself or Maim She'ein himself. You cannot assume that he's dead. So Rav Meir tells a story. There was a fellow who fell into a large pit, and he came up after 3 days, even though it was Maim She'esh himself. You could see the pit. There's no other way around. If he came out of the pit, you would have seen him. He came up after 3 days. So that's what he said. That's what he said. Yossi didn't agree. He says, no, if he fell into a pit that you could see all the sides, you assume he's dead. So Tanya, they answered Rav Meir when he told that story. That was a miracle. Normally, a person cannot fall into a pit and come up after 3 days. He would have been dead by then. So don't tell us a story from a nace. That was a nace. A nace happened. We don't rely on these. I mean, we assume that he's dead. The Gemara says, my saying, why is that a nace? That he fell into a pit and he only came out. Why is that a nace? Is it because he didn't eat and drink for 3 days? He fell into an empty pit and he didn't eat for 3 days. It's possible to live without eating for 3 days. People go on hunger strikes, right? But Sivit says, what did Esther say to the Jewish people? That sumu alai, bal tochlu, bal tishtu, shloshes yomim. Don't eat for 3 days. They could survive that. So what's the miracle? Came up after 3 days that he didn't eat or sleep. Now he didn't eat or drink. It's possible not to eat or drink for 3 days. Ella below 9, he didn't sleep. In other words, the pit wasn't an empty pit. He fell into a bora gadol. He fell into a large pit, and the pit had water. Right, the pit had water here. We're talking about a pit that was full of water. Rashi doesn't tell us in the Mishnah, but obviously it had water over here, and the concern was they would have drowned, because the only way he wouldn't have drowned is if he stayed awake. But how can he stay awake for 3 days? It's impossible to stay awake for 3 days. That was the miracle. Eldelo 9, he didn't sleep. Rabbi Yochanan said we had this Gemara in Shavuos. And the Dharm Shvuah Shalishin says, a man swears I'm not going to sleep for 3 days. I swear I'm not going to sleep for 3 days. So is that a Shvuah? The Gemara says no, Malkin also. You give a Malchus right away for what's called a Shvuah Shav. It's a lie. It's like swearing that this wood is made out of stone when it's not. I swear I'm not going to sleep for 3 days. It's impossible. It's impossible for a man to stay awake. It's possible not to eat for 3 days and survive, but it's impossible not to doze off for 72 hours. So Shaloish Malkin, so you give Malchus B'Yishamal, let him go to sleep right away, meaning the Shvuah is not valid. He can go to sleep right away because you give him Malchus anyway, it's a Shvuah Shav. So that was the miracle. The miracle was that he couldn't sleep. If he fell asleep, he would have drowned. So it must be the miracle was that he didn't sleep for 72 hours. Rav Meir, what about Rav Meir? Why did Rav Meir bring a story from that indicating that it's not a nace? This is my time. What's his reasoning if it's a miracle? Rav Kana, keep like Avi, keep an Avi. He says very simple. It was a pit full of water, but there were arches in there that he stood on. So he was able to stand and keep his head above the water. V'Rabbanan, the Shai Shahava. No, those were made out of marble, and he wouldn't have been able to sit on them. He would have slipped off and fallen to the water. And if he fell asleep, he would have drowned. So it was a miracle. It's possible that he could have clutched onto these marble arches there, and slept a little bit. In other words, he could have held on to the poor things and slept a little bit with his head above water. So therefore, it wasn't a miracle. That was the machlokas here. Rabbi Yossi says, no, that was a miracle. Don't tell me stories from a miracle. A person can't survive in Maim Sheish Lem Sof. If you see that he didn't come out, he must be dead. Tan Rabbanan. The story, Nechunya was a great tzaddik who used to dig ditches and wells for the Oler Regam, for the pilgrims who came up to Yerushalayim for the Shalosh Regalim. There wasn't enough water for them to drink. How did they survive on their way up in Eretz Yisrael? So he would dig wells for them. It's a great chesed. He had a gemach for digging wells and dug wells. The story with his daughter, Shnaf Labor Hagadol, she fell into a big pit of water. They told, this is Nechunya Chofer Sich, and he was the father of this girl. And they come and they told Chanina ben Dosa, who was a great tzaddik and a miracle worker, and they said, listen, this daughter of Nechunya fell into the pit. So Shah Rishona, the first hour that they told him about it, that they told him about her, Amalem Shalom, she's okay. Shnia, Amalem Shalom. The second hour, he said, don't worry, she's still okay. Shlichus, the third hour, Amalem, also she came out of the bar already. I could rest assured she came out. And that's what happened. Amallah Biti Mialacha, when she came out, she came before Chanina, and he said, who got you out of the pit? Who got you out of the pit of water? Amallah Zachar Shal Rechelim Nizamli. There was a male sheep like a ram who came. V'zakim manigo, and there was an old man leading him, like Avram Avinu. Amrulo, they said to him, Navi, so you were right. Somebody came and took her out of the bore. They said to Rav Chanina Medosa, Navi, are you a prophet that you were able to say by the third hour you knew she had escaped? I am not a prophet, nor am I the son of a prophet. Ella, something that her father was occupied with, say, helping people with water. Would it be possible? In other words, this person, her father, was the one who supplied water to all the Jewish people. He was such a great tzaddik. He supplied. His daughter's going to die in water, is going to drown. So I knew that she was saved. That's how I knew. And even though he said that, his own son died of thirst. His own son, this Nechunya, and even though his daughter was saved she wasn't drowned in the water, but still the son died from a lack of water, even though his father supplied water. It says it's very stormy around God. Malam, what does that mean? Sa'ara means there was a big storm, but the darshan that Hashem is medakte, he is exacting with those around him like a hairbreadth. In other words, like Moshe Rabbeinu, hit the rock instead of talking to the rock. It's such a big deal. Yes, because Hashem said, speak to the rock, and he hit the rock. We just had that. So the same way here, Hashem is very medaktik. Even the slightest sin that a person did, Hashem is medaktik with him. Kenny learns it from a different pasuk. It says, "Kel na'arotz b'sod kedoshim rava," a dreaded God in the great council of the holy ones, the Noral Kosvav, and he is feared by all those around him. In other words, God is dreaded by those who are very holy because he's very exacting with them. So again, we're talking here about that you can, even though normally you need 2 Eidim to be matzah a woman to get remarried, anything that involves erva or marriage or divorce. But because of Iguna, the rabbis were makel and the rabbis were lenient. And they said that a woman could testify about her husband herself. She's not her sister-in-law, not her co-wife, not her mother-in-law, but a woman herself who knows that her husband's dead can say that he's dead, so that she can't remarry, or that she could make yibum, right? So we're makel about that. We're makel even with 1 aid. 1 aid comes along, even if the person's not a proper aid. Anybody who comes along and says that he's dead, we generally believe them because of iguna. So here the Mishnah tells us not only a regulator, even if she just heard women talking, you walk by and you said, did you hear? Yankel died. That's good enough. They weren't testifying. They weren't testifying in court, and they weren't coming to mouth. You just heard that he died. That's good enough. Even if you're from children, tinokos omrim, we're going to eulogize and bury this guy. They heard some kids talking. We're going to Yankel's levaya. That's good enough. You can report. You can go and tell his wife that he's dead, and she can get remarried. She's permitting him. Whether they had kavana, whether they had intention to testify or not. Kids aren't kosher. Kids or women aren't kosher witnesses. Still, whether they had kavana or not, you can allow his wife to get remarried based on it. If it's a Jewish person, even though he has kavana to be matzah her. He's kavana to give testimony and say that the husband's dead. Even if he had kavana or didn't have kavana, we'll see that even if he didn't have kavana, it's even better, because then you stop talking. You stop masich l'pitumo. If he had kavana to give testimony, we don't rely on that, because you're afraid a guy might be trying to fool you. So if a guy comes along and says, "Oh, I know your husband's dead," that's not good enough, because he might be trying to fool you. We don't rely on that. Says the Gemara on the first place. We're going to talk about the guy in a few minutes in more detail. But first, the Gemara says, "Children, you hear children talking, going to a funeral. So what? They're going to a funeral. They didn't come from the funeral. They're going to a funeral. Maybe they got mixed up. They got the wrong name. Maybe they're not going to a real. Maybe they didn't go to the funeral at the end. Maybe they're just talking their way, but the guy wasn't really dead. They're saying, "Oh, we heard this guy was in an accident. Are you going to go to the funeral? Maybe he survived." They said, they came in, they said they're coming from the funeral. It's one thing to say we're going to the funeral, maybe he didn't really die at the end. But they says over here, we're coming from the funeral, then he's dead. Right? Maybe this is what happened. They're going to the funeral of Yankel. Kids play. You ask your kid, what's the doll's name? They'll tell you the doll's name is Dolly or Yankel or something, right? Kids make up names. Maybe the kids said we're coming from the funeral of Yankel. Maybe Yankel was their toy, or Yankel was a grasshopper. They played with the grasshopper and it died, so we're going to bury the little Yankel, the grasshopper. How do you know that was the person? Maybe they just used that person's name, Yankel ben Ruvain, whatever they called the grasshopper by that name. How do you know the real Yankel ben Ruvain died? The Kamri came to Cain Rabbanan Havos and said, these rabbis were at the funeral. We came from the funeral and these rabbis were there. Cain became Satani Havos, these eulogizers were there. So you could tell that the kids were just talking. They weren't giving edus because they're not qualified to be witnesses. But that's good enough because of Iguna, the rabbis were makel and they said that you can get married based on that. But by Goy, at the end of the Mishnah said, Rav Yuma said, if a guy had kavana, he said anybody's believed, women, children, etc. Yuma says, listen, by a Jew, yes, if he had kavana or not kavana to testify, you can rely on that. By a guy, if he had kavana to testify, it's no good. You don't accept that. I remember Rav Shmuel. That's only if the guy had kavana to be mat to this woman. Then maybe the guy wanted to make the woman commit adultery so she shouldn't be able to stay married to her husband. So he tells her, oh, your husband's dead. He died on the oil rig with us. We were on the oil rig. He fell off and he's dead. So maybe he's lying. So Buddha says, he wanted mat on the skaven lahayid. If he's just coming to give testimony, he's not coming to be mat. He's just coming to give testimony. Then they do some edus. It is good testimony. That's what Yud Shmuel says. And how do we know? How do we know if he's coming to allow her to get remarried or just to give testimony? Rav Yosef, if he says, listen, this guy's dead, you can marry off his wife now. Then he's coming to mat to her. If he says stam, if he just says, I know this guy died, maybe he doesn't even know that the guy was married. If he just says, I know this guy's dead, that's the skaven laedus. And Rabbi Shmuel said that if it's a skaven laedus, that's okay. Even that's only the guy's not believed if he's coming to be mat to the wife to get remarried. If he's coming to give testimony, he could rely on his testimony. No. Lo kacha yamaisa, she wasn't in a story with Oshia Barabi. Oshia, who was a great scholar, she'etiram im shmona b'chamishas kanim, that he went to be mater a woman in this case with 85 skanim based on the testimony of a guy who said this guy is dead. Amar lahem, and he told them, the rabbis, lo shana el shana skaven lahater. And he said, that's only when, if he's miskaven to be mater, that you don't believe him. I'm going to skaven lahayid. But if he's coming just to say that the guy died, his kavanah is not to allow her to get remarried, then it's okay. His edus is accepted. The lo hodu lo chachamim. He went with these 85 skanim, and the chacham were not moted him. They said, no. The guy is not believed no matter what, whether he's coming to be mater her or whether he's just coming to give edus. Our Mishnah says, by a guy, if he had kavanah, then his edus is not edus. Otherwise, if he didn't have kavanah, it's good accepted. So how does it work out that you do accept the testimony of a guy? If you say that the guy's testimony is no good, not only if he's coming to be mater, but even if he's just coming to edus, he doesn't even know that she's married. He's just coming stam to give testimony. How do you know that? Even then you don't believe him. So where is he believed? If he's talking stam, he's talking stam. He's unintentionally. He's just mentioning in past. They're having a drink, and he says, "Oh, you're that guy. He's dead." They're stam schmoozing. He's not coming to give testimony at all. Not to testify that he died. Not to say his wife got married. Just incidentally, innocently, he's just talking without thinking that he's believed. Yahoo, like a story. Davi Kamar Basel. Man, a guy was going through town. Says, Manika Bechavei, is anybody here from the house of Chavoi? Manika Bechavei, is anybody here from Chavoi's house? Shachav Goy, because I know that is anybody here from anybody here Chavoi? Is anybody here from Chavoi's house? Anybody here from the Joneses? Anybody the Joneses? Because Mr. Jones died. Then he's not coming to give testimony. He's not coming. He's just reporting a story. People like to tell the news. So he says, you should know that I know that he died. So in a case like that, he's believed. Insaba and his wife was allowed to get remarried. Rav Yosef allowed his wife to get remarried based on that. Another story. Man was walking around calling out, "Vaile leprosha's riza davamnisa." Woe unto the very strong, the very good horseman who was in Pampadisa. There was a very great horseman, Gibor Chayil, a hero, a strong horseman in Pampadisa. Woe unto him, the Shachav. I saw that he died. This great horseman, this great rider, was a valiant horseman, warrior. Woe unto this guy because he died. And the instant Rav Yosef became Rav Levisser, either Rav Yosef or Rava allowed his wife to get remarried based on that testimony of that guy, because the guy was not coming to give testimony. He was just saying, "Oh, woe unto this guy. His wife, I know that he died." Another story. Manika Bechasa. Is there anybody here from the house of Chasa? Tava Chasa. Is anybody here from Chasa's house? Because I want you to know that Chasa drowned. Amam Nachman Holakim. Achlu cover the Chasa. If he drowned, must be that the fish ate him. The fish must have eaten him. Midibur Rav Nachman, from Rav Nachman's words. In other words, he confirmed. The guy said, "Oh, Chasa drowned." Rav Nachman said, "Oh, the fish must have eaten him up." From his words, Azla Devisu, the Chasa, she went. Instantly, she got remarried. And they didn't say anything to her. In other words, based on that, she got remarried. Even though, what did we just say? Not the case before where the guy said, "I know that he died." Here they said that he drowned, but he drowned in the open seas. And she got married based on that, even though in the open sea she's not allowed to. So this would we say that if it's open seas, his wife can't get remarried because maybe he washed ashore. It's only at first. But if she got married to a second husband based on that testimony that somebody said he drowned, you allow it, because the odds are that he did drown. But the chachila, she shouldn't get remarried until there's a body, because it's possible that he washed up somewhere else. Some say, instead of Rav Nachman Ledvisu, that Rav Nachman not that Rav Nachman reported, "Oh, he must have died," and based on that, his wife went and got remarried, even though she shouldn't have, because she should get married. But some say that Rav Nachman married off his wife. Amar Chasa Gav Rabbi, he said Chasa is a great man. He says he's a great man. And Misa the Solik, if he would have gotten out of the water in the open seas, Kalasley would have heard about it in the mill. But that's not the case that we said on the Al. Loshna Gavarava, Loshna Lav Gavarava, the evidence of whether he's a great man or not a great man. You don't assume that if he's a great man, we would have heard if he washed ashore. And since we didn't hear about it, he must be dead. You don't assume that. If a man drowned in the open seas, it's one thing if he was knifed to death, or fell into a pit of scorpions, or fell into a pit that you could see all the sides. But if he drowned in the open seas, you cannot assume that he died. Maybe he survived, and his wife should not get remarried. However, if she did, without asking, or in this case, maybe Rav Nachman thought that too, because he was a great man, but if she did get remarried, we don't force her out of the marriage unless, of course, the man comes home, showing that he survived. However, here's a story slightly different. A guy tells the Jew, cut down some grass, some fodder, and give it to my animals, on Shabbos. He told him Shabbos. The guy took a gun to the Jew and he said, "Listen, cut down some grass, detach some grass, do a malacha on Shabbos, and give it to my animals. If you don't, I'm going to kill you, by Israel, like I killed that other Jew. The Amrle Bashli Shabbos, I told that other Jew to cook for me on Shabbos, and he didn't, below Bashli. Like, listen, I killed him." So now here's the problem. The guy's not stam reporting, "Oh, I heard this guy died. They're having a drink. Oh, you heard your uncle? Your uncle's dead." No. This guy tells the Jew number one, "I want you to Michal Shabbos and cut some grass for my animals. And if you don't do it, I'm going to kill you like I killed number two, another Jew, who I asked him to cook for me on Shabbos and he refused, and I killed him. I'll kill you the same way." Shama Devisu, the wife of number one, just heard this, not the wife of number, the wife of number two, who heard this number two. He says, "I'm going to kill you like I killed number two." So Shama Devisu, the wife of number two, heard about it, right? That he says he killed. Also came for Abaye, And she said, listen, can I get remarried based on that? The guy said it. He wasn't giving testimony, but he was doing it as a threat. He was telling number one, if you're not Machal Shabbos me, I'm going to kill you like I killed number two. Maybe it was just, he didn't really kill number two. He just was trying to threaten number one. It's not like he's reporting they're having a drink and he says, oh, I heard this guy was killed, or I saw him die, or I saw him drown. No, here he said, I'm going to kill you like I killed number two. Can number two's wife get remarried based on that? So she came before by this question, Shahisa Tlosa Wrigley. He kept her waiting for 3 regalim. Rashi says, because at 3 regalim, at the regalim time is the time when everybody comes to learn Torah together, or it's a time for 3 regalim. Rashi says it could also be 3 yard sites, because at yard site of a great man, people come and they learn Torah, le'ilu nishmaso. Anyway, he waited for at least 3 regalim, at least 3 holidays, because maybe one of the rabbis would be able to paskin for him, or by himself didn't have an answer to this question. Because we know that a guy is believed Masich Levitumo, he's not believed if he's giving testimony, but over here would you believe him when the report was basically a threat? Maybe he was just trying to threaten the guy, but he didn't really kill number two. Amalur Avada Barava says, Zil come and go, so ask Rav Yosef, the Charav Sikin, he's got a sharp knife. Now, he's a real smart man. Ask him the Shiloh. He told the wife, number two, he asked him the Shiloh. Ozla, she went from Pashat, and he decided the issue from this case. Let's say a guy was selling fruits for shuk in the market. He's trying to be meshabech. He's trying to praise the fruits and say how these are superior fruits. They're from the first 3 years. The arla, from the arla, the first 3 years of a tree. It's arla. You're not allowed to eat it, but he says they're really good. They're fresh. It's a young tree, very strong, vibrant tree. These are good fruits, and he's saying they're arla and shalazika, or they're from azika. Azika is first Rashi says it's a guarded field, but he doesn't like that pshat. He's talking on Shemitah, but he says Azika was a place in Eretz. He prefers to say the pshat is that Azika was a place in Eretz Yisrael, and they had very good fruits there. And he's trying to say these fruits are from Azika. Now, he was in Chutz La'aretz apparently. This guy was in Chutz La'aretz in Babel, and in Babel you don't have to take Trumas Amaishus on your fruits, but in Eretz Yisrael you do. So he's saying they're from the great town in Eretz Yisrael where they have great fruits. So do you have to be concerned if they're from Eretz Yisrael? Maybe you have to take Trumas Amaishus. If it's Arla, you're not allowed to eat it at all. Or Shel Net Rabbi, also you have to take it to Shleim to eat. And the guy said that, you don't have to believe anything that he said. They're not Arla, they're not from Azika, no Trumas Amaishus, they're not Arla, not Rabbi, no Skavna, Lashbiach, Mekcha. He's just trying to say they're great, they're choice fruits. That's all he's trying to do. So when a guy says something, you can't take him at his word. The same thing over here. You can't take him at his word that number two was killed. Your husband went overseas or went on a long trip. The fact that he didn't come back yet doesn't mean that he's dead. And this guy who said to number one, I'm going to kill you like I killed number two is meaningless. He's just trying to scare the guy and say I killed number two, but you can't rely on that. Abu Yudin east side, and Abu Yudin from that place in Sidon, Amr Maisi, we saw the story of the Yisrael, but they were on the road. A guy and a Jew were on the road. And the Chacham said, Omar Chaval Yehudi, it's a shame for this Jew. He was with me on the road. Shemes, he died, but he died on the road. And I buried him. They see you Ishto, and they married off his wife. Meaning, this is a case where the guy was not trying to threaten him by saying, I killed the other guy. He didn't really kill the other guy. He's just talking. He didn't walk on the road and say, oh, this is the spot where I buried Yankel. His wife can get remarried based on that because he's not giving testimony. He's just mentioning it in passing. There's a story with a group of Jews. They were going to Antioch. It's a group. Polar is like a group, but usually it's like a chain gang. Like they were chained together. They were in captivity. They were in Antioch. A guy came and said, "Oh, a shame for that group of Jews. Shemesu, they died. The kavartim, we buried them all here. They see us and Shashem. All their wives were allowed to get remarried based on that testimony, because again, the guy was just speaking. He was just talking incidentally in passing. He wasn't giving testimony or trying to threaten somebody with that. Another story, 60 men, Beta. They were going to the siege of Beta when Beta was under siege. And a guy came and said, oh, a shame, it's a woe unto those 16 people. They were going on the road to Beta. Shemesu, they died. The kavartim, and we buried them. They see us the same, and they married off the women. So what do you see over here? That you believe the testimony of a woman, even if a child who said he came from the funeral of Yankel ben Ruvain, you can rely on that to marry off Yankel's wife. even on the testimony of a guy, if it's not testimony, if he's just mentioning it in passing, and in the annals of the Jewish history, they believe, great rabbis believed, even a story was, he passed by, there was a guy there in a shank in a bar, and he said that this guy died on the road, and they allowed the wife to get remarried because there was no way to find him. Today, unless it's a war or something like that, it's very hard to, there's Masarif Gittin and people like that who disappear on purpose, but it's very hard for a person to get lost totally in this world. But there are cases, and then you have to paskin, or cases like like we have with 9/11, where the bodies were not necessarily found. It took them years to sift through and get all the DNA, etc. Me'id lo. Now, because we're makel, and we said you can give testimony as long as you saw the face or some other clear signs. If he had a siman muvak, a distinct sign, like he had a particular scar on the bottom of his foot or something of that sort, and you know that it was him, fine. You can even give testimony or aner. You saw him only at night, only with a torch, or by the light of the moon. You heard somebody say that this guy died, but there was a basko, a heavenly voice came and said this guy died. So who? Ma'aseh was a story. Sha'amar Rosh Har. Man was standing on the top of Mount Vamar. Ish Ploni ben Ploni Mimakom Ploni Mace. Yankel ben Ruvain from that town, from whatever, died. They went to that mountaintop and they didn't find anybody. They married his wife based on, listen to this, not even a person. We can't even find the person. You heard a voice say that this guy died, but we don't want the woman to be an iguna. They were matter of her to get remarried based on that. The Shuv Ma'aseh but Salmon, there's a story in Salmon in that place. I am Yankel ben Ruben, Neshchani Nachash. I've been bitten by a snake and I'm dying. Very nice, I'm dying. And they went below Ikiru, they didn't recognize him. Maybe because the venom of the snake made him be Mashana Tzura and they couldn't recognize him. They couldn't recognize him anymore. Maybe he changed or whatever after death or whatever happened. They didn't recognize him. They married off his wife based on the fact that he identified himself as he was dying. So you see how far the rabbis went to be matter a woman that she shouldn't be an iguna. Amar Rav Shmuel, Tana Beishamai Omer Eimasian Basko. Beishamai says you can't listen to Basko. You have to have a person over here. You can't just say based on a voice. Beisol Omer Masian Basko. Do. You know, Mike Mashmuel must listen. It's a Mishnah. We know Mishnah said that you can believe it a Basko. What are you telling me? Beisol says yes. Beishamai says no. We know we go like Beisol. Our Mishnah said that. If you find the Stam Mishnah or a Stam Brisa that says Eimasian, that says you don't marry off a woman based on a Paschal, Beishamai is Beishamai. You should know it's Beishamai Shita because our Mishnah is Beisilo. And we pass them, we sold. How do you know it was a person at all who reported that? A Baskol just means Shamu Kol Soekas Ploni Mace Adam Mitzalmai. You didn't see a person there. You didn't see a person, you didn't see a person's shape at all. You just heard the voice. So it's not necessarily a voice from heaven. So somebody yelled out. You heard somebody scream out. Based on that alone, you don't even know who it was. You're allowed to get married. Maybe it was a shade. Maybe it was a demon, and they was just trying to cheat us. And you can't believe a demon. Amarav Sharolo Dmusami. He looked like he had the shape of a person. Inunami Damu. They also look like people. You saw him in his shadow, like in his shadow. They also have a shadow. You saw the shadow of a shadow. It's like the shadow through another shadow. Maybe they also have a shadow of a shadow. Yonasan, who was a shade, told me they have a shadow. They cast a shadow, but their shadow does not cast another shadow. That is the characteristic of a demon. So therefore, you saw the shadow of a shadow, so you know it was a person. Okay. Right, maybe it wasn't the shade because you saw the shadow of its shadow, but maybe the person reporting this death was a tzara. We said before, a tzara, co-wife is not believed. Tana de Rishmal b'shasa sakana. When we're in a tape of where a person is in danger, his life is in danger, like somebody who was in a bore, and he says, whoever can hear me, write again to my wife, you write again, and you rely on that. Show me, even though we don't know that it's really that person. He says, I am Yankel ben Ruvain, divorced my wife, Leah Bas Rivka, whatever, divorced my wife. We rely on that. Here also, it's like a dangerous time, because if you're not going to believe this person, the woman will be an iguna. So here, you're right. It's possible that it is a tzara. If a wife is not normally believed. You write a get. If a person fell into born and says, "I'm dying over here," write a get for my wife. You believe him even though you don't know that it's him. He's just identifying by his name, but we can't see him. We don't know for sure that it's him because it's sakana. We don't know it to be an iguna. The same thing over here. It's possible it's a tzara, but we don't want to assume that it's a tzara because then she'll be an iguna. So because of iguna, the rabbis were makel. All right, tomorrow we'll pick it up from this Mishnah, the second of 3 Mishnayos on this daf. And Mitzvah will make a siyum tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get a chance to at least learn the beginning of Ksubas. Have a good day, everybody. Be well.